The first time I saw her, she was kneeling in the front yard of the small blue house next to mine, her fingers buried deep in the soil, like she was trying to anchor herself to the earth. The afternoon sun rested gently on her shoulders, catching in her hair as the wind teased a few strands loose. I had just pulled into my driveway, the moving boxes still stacked in my back seat even though I'd been moved in for weeks. I remember gripping the steering wheel longer than necessary, watching her through the windshield. It wasn't that she looked exactly like my wife. If she had, maybe I could have labeled the shock, named it, prepared for it. No, it was subtler than that. It was the way she tilted her head while examining the flowers, the faint crease between her brows when she concentrated, the way she brushed dirt from her palms and then tucked her hair behind her ear with a small, absent-minded gesture. That gesture knocked the air out of me. My wife used to do that every time she was focused on something, cooking, reading, even arguing with me. She'd tuck her hair back like she was clearing space to think. I stepped out of the car, the door creaking louder than usual. The neighbor glanced up, startled for just a second before her expression softened into a polite smile. A normal smile, a neighborly one. I couldn't return it. Instead, I nodded stiffly and busied myself with grabbing an empty box from the back seat, pretending it required immense attention. My heart was pounding so hard it felt visible, like it might pulse right through my shirt. "Hi," she called gently. Her voice carried easily across the short stretch of lawn between us. I raised a hand in acknowledgement without looking at her. "Hey." It came out flat, distant. She hesitated, as if deciding whether to say more, then returned to her garden. I could feel her presence even without looking. It pressed against me, familiar and foreign all at once. Inside my house, the silence greeted me like an old companion. Too big, too empty, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I set the box down and leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. This was why I'd moved here. A different town, a different street. No hospital around the corner, no grocery store aisle where we'd argued over cereal brands. No park bench where we used to sit on Sundays. A place without memories, and yet somehow memory had moved in next door. Over the following days, I adjusted my routine with almost military precision. I left for work earlier, just in case she stepped outside around 8. I returned later. If I heard her front door open while I was in the kitchen, I'd pause mid-step and wait until it shut again before continuing. It was absurd. I knew it was. But grief is not logical. It doesn't care about reason or maturity. It only cares about survival. One afternoon, I was mowing the lawn when I sensed her watching. I didn't need to look. I could feel it. That same warmth of awareness you get when someone's gaze lingers. Against my better judgment, I glanced up. She stood by her mailbox, a small stack of envelopes in her hand. She wasn't staring in a rude way, just curious, observing. There was kindness in her expression, the kind that invites conversation. I killed the mower abruptly, pretending I needed to check something. "You're new here, right?" she asked, stepping a little closer, but still keeping a respectful distance. "Yeah," I replied, focusing on adjusting the mower handle, even though nothing was wrong with it. "I'm Clara." Her name landed softly in the air between us. "Daniel. Nice to meet you, Daniel." I nodded once. There was a pause, the kind where normal people would fill it with small talk about the weather or the neighborhood. I felt her waiting. "It's a quiet street," she offered. "That's good," I said. Another pause. She shifted her weight slightly. "If you ever need anything, I'm right next door." The sincerity in her voice made something twist painfully in my chest. My wife used to say the same thing to new neighbors. She believed in welcoming people and building small bridges. "Thanks," I muttered. And then I restarted the mower before she could say anything else. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Her smile hadn't been identical to my wife's, but it carried the same softness, the same patience. It wasn't her face that hurt, it was the echo. Days blurred together. Each time I saw Clara outside, watering plants, carrying groceries, sweeping her porch, I felt the same internal collision, a pull toward familiarity and a shove away from it. One evening, I came home to find her struggling with a broken fence panel between our properties. The wood had split near the hinge, hanging crookedly. She pressed her shoulder against it, trying to hold it steady while tightening a screw. The sight rooted me in place. My wife had always insisted on fixing small household things herself before asking for help. "I can handle it," she'd laugh even when the screwdriver slipped. Clara sighed in frustration as the panel tilted again. Every instinct told me to walk over, to offer assistance. It was the decent thing to do, the neighborly thing. Instead, I walked straight past her and into my house. I closed the door gently, but the click sounded final. Inside, I stood in the hallway, staring at nothing. My chest felt tight, like I'd swallowed something too large. Why couldn't I just help her? Because standing that close would mean seeing the details, the flecks of color in her eyes, the way she smiled in relief. And I wasn't sure I could survive that. Later that week, there was a knock on my door. My stomach dropped instantly. I knew. When I opened it, Clara stood there holding a small plate covered in foil. She looked slightly nervous but determined. "Hi," she said. Up close, the resemblance was less overwhelming, but more intimate. I could see the subtle differences now. A small scar near her eyebrow, a slightly deeper dimple on her left cheek. "I made too many brownies," she explained. "Thought I'd share." The scent of chocolate drifted toward me. My wife used to bake when she was stressed. Brownies were her specialty. "That's kind of you," I said, keeping my eyes fixed somewhere near her shoulder instead of her face. She noticed. "Did I do something?" she asked gently. My grip tightened around the edge of the door. "No. You always seem to disappear when I'm around." Her tone wasn't accusatory, just confused. "I've just been busy," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't true. She studied me for a long second, her eyes searching, trying to read what I refused to say. The silence stretched. "Well," she said finally, forcing a small smile, "welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks." I took the plate, our fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent a sharp ache through me, unexpected and unwelcome. I stepped back, retreating into the house. "Good night." "Good night, Daniel." When the door closed, I leaned against it, breathing unevenly. The brownies sat untouched on the kitchen counter for hours. I stared at them from across the room, as if they carried answers I wasn't ready to face. Avoiding her seemed easier, safer, because if I allowed myself to look too long, to talk too much, I feared the line between memory and possibility would blur, and I wasn't ready to betray the past by imagining a future. It rained the following Sunday in a slow, steady rhythm that made the entire street feel hushed, as if the world had lowered its voice. The sky was a heavy gray, and the scent of wet pavement drifted through the open window. I'd been standing in my living room for nearly 10 minutes, staring out at nothing in particular when I saw her. Clara stood at the edge of our shared driveway, no umbrella, no jacket, just the rain soaking into her sweater and darkening it by the second. Her arms were folded, not defensively, but as if she were holding herself steady. I knew that posture, not from my wife this time, but from myself. It was the stance of someone who had rehearsed a conversation and was done postponing it. I could have pretended not to see her. Instead, I stepped outside. The rain met me instantly, cool and insistent. By the time I reached the bottom of the porch steps, my hair was damp, my shirt clinging slightly to my shoulders. I stopped a few feet away from her. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a firmness I hadn't heard before. I nodded once. "Okay." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rainwater traced the curve of her jaw, slid down her neck. She didn't seem to care. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" she asked. There it was, direct, unavoidable. "I'm not," I said automatically, even though the excuse sounded hollow the second it left my mouth. She exhaled sharply. "You are. You won't look at me. You disappear when I'm outside. You cut conversations short before they even begin." Her voice softened slightly. "Did I do something?" The question wasn't angry. It was vulnerable, and that made it worse. "No," I said quickly. "You didn't do anything." "Then what is it?" she pressed. "Because I'm starting to feel like I'm offending you just by existing." Her words landed harder than she probably intended. I stared at the wet concrete between us, watching raindrops explode into tiny crowns. I had two choices, retreat again or tell the truth. My chest tightened. "It's not you," I said slowly. "That's not an answer." She stepped closer, closing the distance just enough. that I could see the tiny flecks of green in her brown eyes. I forced myself not to look away this time. You look at me like I've done something wrong, she said quietly. And I haven't, so please, just tell me why. The rain grew heavier, drumming softly against rooftops and leaves. It felt like the world was listening. Because looking at you hurts, I said. The confession slipped out before I could reshape it into something safer. Her brows pulled together. Hurts? I nodded, swallowing past the tightness in my throat. You remind me of someone? She didn't interrupt. My wife, I continued, the word catching slightly. I hadn't said it out loud to anyone in weeks. She passed away last year. Understanding dawned slowly across her face, replacing confusion with something gentler. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shook my head faintly. It's not your fault. There are things. The way you tilt your head when you're listening. The way you tuck your hair back. The way you smile like you're not sure if you should. My voice trembled, despite my effort to steady it. It's not exact, but it's close enough. Clara's eyes softened, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw her not as a mirror of memory, but as someone absorbing my pain. I moved here to escape reminders, I admitted. Different town, different house. I thought distance would make it easier to breathe. I let out a humorless laugh. Then you started gardening next door. A faint, sympathetic smile touched her lips. I wasn't trying to haunt you, she said gently. I know. The rain began to ease slightly, thinning to a softer drizzle. The air felt cooler now. For what it's worth, she said after a moment, I lost someone too. That caught me off guard. I looked up fully this time. My fiancé, she explained quietly. Car accident. 2 years ago. The words shifted something inside me. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't imagined she carried her own absence. I'm sorry, I said. She nodded once, accepting it. I moved here because everywhere else felt crowded with memories. Every coffee shop, every street corner. I thought starting over would mean fewer ghosts. A silence settled between us, not awkward this time, but shared. I guess we both underestimated how memory works, she added. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, she studied my face carefully. When you avoid me, it doesn't just protect you. It creates a different kind of hurt. I kept wondering what I'd done wrong. If I was too friendly, too much. Guilt crept in, warm and uncomfortable. That wasn't fair to you, I admitted. I'm sorry. She gave a small shrug. Grief makes us strange. I get that. The honesty in her tone loosened. Something in my chest that had been clenched for months. I'm not her, Clara said softly, and I'm not trying to be. I know, I replied, but I'm also not a reminder meant to punish you, she continued. I'm just me. The rain slowed to scattered droplets. Somewhere down the street a car door slammed. For the first time I allowed myself to truly see her, not through the fog of comparison, not filtered through memory. I noticed the slight scar near her eyebrow, the different shape of her smile, the steadiness in her posture despite the vulnerability of this conversation. She wasn't my wife. She was a woman who had lost someone and still chose to plant flowers. I don't want to keep running, I said quietly. I just didn't know how to stand still without it hurting. It might always hurt a little, she replied. But maybe it doesn't have to hurt alone. The simplicity of that sentence settled deeply. I had been carrying my grief like something fragile and private, afraid that letting anyone near it would either shatter it or replace it. But standing there in the damp aftermath of rain, I realized grief wasn't something that needed replacing. It needed room. Clara extended her hand, rainwater still clinging to her fingers. Hi, she said softly. I'm Clara, your neighbor, not a ghost. A hesitant smile pulled at my mouth. I took her hand. Daniel. Her grip was warm and steady. We didn't say anything else for a few seconds. The clouds began to thin, and a pale strip of light pushed through in the distance. I make decent coffee, she said finally, and I promise not to resemble anyone while you drink it. A quiet laugh escaped me, unexpected, rusty from disuse. I might take you up on that, I replied. As we walked back toward our houses, side by side but not touching, I noticed something subtle. Looking at her still hurt, but it wasn't the sharp, unbearable pain from before. It was softer now, like a bruise instead of an open wound. And for the first time since my wife's passing, I didn't feel like I had to choose between honoring the past and stepping into the present. Maybe healing wasn't about erasing resemblance. Maybe it was about learning to see the difference and allowing yourself to live with both.